Can you please introduce yourself?
So I'm Carlos Zednik. I'm an assistant professor at TU Eindhoven in the Netherlands. I work in the philosophy and ethics group, so which means that I'm a philosopher technically, but my background is in computer science and cognitive science. So what I do is basically, so a lot of people think of philosophers as being primarily ethicists, especially in the AI space. What I mostly do is work on non-ethical questions, so more theoretical questions about the nature of intelligence, about how we can understand and explain intelligence in a scientific way. So here, what I try to do is I try to build connections between exactly cognitive science, which means psychology and neuroscience, and AI, and to basically say, okay, if these AI systems are behaving in intelligent ways, are performing intelligent tasks, learning language, making decisions, and things like that, often the best way to understand those systems and explain those systems is to treat them kind of as beings the way we do in psychology or neuroscience and explain them as psychological beings. So yeah, what I do mostly is kind of theory development for understanding intelligence and explaining it, but also I work together with engineers and scientists, right, to try to kind of develop tools and methods. And also, to a certain extent, I'm involved in kind of regulatory oversight or developing kind of norms and best practices for how to develop systems and explain systems.
Who are your DCs and what do they do?
I have one DC in the alignAI project. Her name is Zeynep Kabader, and she is now in her kind of in the end of her first year. So she's still putting kind of the design, so to speak, of her research project. In the Netherlands, we have kind of the first 9 months are the time when you develop your research project. And what she is going to be working on is self-awareness and meta-reasoning in AI systems. This obviously, well, it starts from the question of can AI systems be self-aware, right? So, of course, this is a bit of a science fiction trope, right? We think of like the Terminator movies when Skynet becomes self-aware, right? But her work is mainly consisting of, okay, what does this actually mean for AI systems to be self-aware? Can AI systems be self-aware, either in principle or with the current technology, in particular with LLMs, which LLMs is, of course, the technological focus within the alignAI project. So what she's looking at is kind of the meta-reasoning abilities, so ability of LLMs to reason about itself, and is evaluating that kind of ability from the perspective of, okay, is this a kind of self-awareness? So this obviously connects kind of with my research interests and kind of my approach of treating these AI systems kind of from a psychological perspective, right? She's really trying to understand the psychology of these AI systems, in particular as it refers to self-awareness. This is kind of the theoretical angle. Let me say a little bit about the kind of practical angle. Of course, in the context of the alignAI project, this kind of self-awareness capacity, right? We assume that self-awareness is important, not only in machines, but also in humans, right? If we're aware of ourselves, we're able to improve our behavior, we're able to kind of reflect on our behavior. And if the goal of the alignAI project is to kind of produce better AI systems, then plausibly some kind of self-awareness capacity or meta-reasoning capacity would be constructive or helpful in helping these AI systems become better, because they can reflect on their own behavior, they can improve their own behavior and improve their own thinking, so to speak. So that's kind of the practical justification of this project.
What motivated you to become involved with the alignAI project?
So yeah, so well, first of all, in a very pragmatic way, so the alignAI project is a doctoral network, right? So it's like a training grant for doctoral students. So in a very straightforward and pragmatic way, it's a really good opportunity to acquire PhD students, right? Which is in a way, as a professor, as an academic, that's one of the most exciting ways to do research, and one of the most interesting ways to do research is to hire kind of a young, talented person to work on a question. Partly, of course, you influence what that question is, but to a large extent, the PhD student themselves has to formulate the question and then kind of make it their own question. And so these doctoral networks are very pragmatically just one way of getting PhD students, which are this really, really cool way of doing research with somebody and not just doing research on your own. In particular, as a philosopher, that's often how we do research. So PhD research is a bit different here. That's just pragmatic. Theoretically and practically, obviously, the question of alignment, which is kind of the central question in the alignAI project, and in particular, alignment of large language models or transformers, or thinking a bit more broadly, also foundation models and things like this. This is, of course, a really, really present theoretical and practical question in society right now, right? This technology is the state of the art. It's a hugely powerful technology that is being used in more and more and more applications every day. Some of these applications are really useful, and I mean, ChatGPT, right, changed the world in many, many ways. Sometimes for the better, but sometimes maybe also not. And so the question is, okay, how do we make sure that these technologies are used for the better rather than for the not so good, right? And the question of alignment, which already is in the title of the project here, is kind of one way of approaching this question or this challenge of making sure that AI systems do what we want them to do, right? The question of alignment is basically how do we design these AI systems, right, so that they kind of reflect our human values, right? Where our human values include things like fairness, right? So like an absence of bias. They also include things like transparency, right? Which means, okay, whenever a decision is made or something is generated, we should have some understanding of how that decision was made or how that output was generated. In part also because then we can correct it, we can question it, we can, if necessary, hold people or institutions accountable for those outputs, things like that. So what we want is these AI systems that are kind of more aligned and better in that way, in that kind of ethical way. And that's what this project is all about. So in particular, the project focuses on these two areas, explainability and fairness, right? And so I'm most interested in the explainability side of things, but I view this as a really, really cool project, an important project to make progress here on making sure that systems are explainable and fair, but then also in training kind of the next generation of scientists, right? From the start already in the methods of, or in being experts on developing, using, deploying LLMs, designing LLMs, but not just any LLMs that are explainable and fair, and in that sense, right, or in that limited sense, of course, aligned with human values. So I think it's a really exciting project and really, really, of course, important to have PhD students.
What unique perspective or expertise does your group or institution bring to the alignAI network?
Yeah. So, well, I guess group. So of course, I work at a huge institution, TU Eindhoven, which is really, really big technical university. But let me start with the group. So I'm a part of the philosophy and ethics group at TUE. So that means, as I already said, we do philosophy and ethics, right? Ethics is a part of philosophy. In that sense, that is a unique perspective within the alignAI project because we're the only philosophy partner, or I mean, I guess philosophy, which is not ethics, right? Obviously, there's other ethics partners within the consortium. But our role in that sense is kind of really a bird's eye role to a certain extent. This is often the role that philosophers play, is to kind of look at what engineers are doing, looking at what people who are kind of more applications oriented are doing, and always making sure that, okay, are we, are we paying attention to the right kind of norms and values, right? Are we doing things in the right way, right? And in order to do that, right, we need to kind of have a bit of an overview on the project as a whole, right? And this is kind of what philosophers often specialize in, right? They often don't look at the specific details of how the technology works, right? But they look at kind of more how is the technology used in context, right? And so this is a bit of our role as philosophers, almost in any technical project, including this one. Um, that's kind of more the ethics side. But I did say that I'm kind of more a theoretical philosopher rather than focused on ethics. So the other role that philosophers play, in particular on the theoretical side, is really kind of foundational theory development, right? Very often, engineers and scientists, right, they are working with certain theories and developing certain technologies that kind of take certain theoretical principles for granted, right? But those theoretical principles are very much a domain of philosophy. So in the field of AI in particular, the main theoretical question that interests me is, well, what is intelligence, right? We are developing artificial intelligence, but we don't even know what intelligence means, right? And this is a typically philosophical question here, is to kind of try to better understand what intelligence is. It's a very, very difficult question, and we probably won't be able to answer the question anytime soon, right? But we can make a little progress. We can say, okay, maybe we don't know exactly what intelligence means, but maybe here's one way of testing it, right? Or here's one very limited aspect of intelligence. As I was saying earlier, my PhD student in this project is working on self-awareness, which presumably is one aspect of intelligence. And so through her work, we get a better understanding of not only can AI systems be self-aware, but what is self-awareness in the first place, right? So this is the role of a philosopher who is not doing ethics, right, within a project like this, is to kind of answer these kind of foundational questions. That is just kind of philosophy and ethics. Of course, I'm embedded at a university, big technical university, and it's not just me, right? There are other PIs from TU Eindhoven in the alignAI project. And so we have quite a bit of expertise on explainability, right, which is one kind of transparency. This is one of my research foci too, but also my colleague Martijn Willemsen, right, is focusing on explainability, which is one of the cornerstones of the alignAI project. And we also have people in industrial design working on, okay, how do we make these systems, right, large language models, usable from a design perspective, right, so that people are more likely to use them in the right kind of ways. So TUE has a lot of expertise on technology development and deployment, right, and kind of my philosophical expertise is just one small aspect of this.
How do you hope for institutions across the network to collaborate to ensure cohesion across research teams?
Yeah, so right, good question. I mean, as the name doctoral network already suggests, right, alignAI is a network, right? It's a network of doctoral students in the first place, but also a network of PIs, right? So kind of experienced researchers, and a network of institutions, right, across several countries, right? Germany, Netherlands, Denmark, several other countries, and the question is here how to collaborate. So what the network is already starting to do is to have regular, it's approximately 6 months apart, summer schools or winter schools for where all the doctoral students are expected, right? So this is kind of in 6 month intervals. All the doctoral students meet and learn on a specific theme, right? So now in about 3 weeks or so, there will be, or 1 month, there will be a meeting in Copenhagen, right, on the topic of safety, right? So how do we develop AI systems that are safe, quote unquote? What does this even mean? And what are the state of the art methods to ensure safety in the AI space? So they're kind of learning content, right, or methods on a particular topic. In 6 months later, in the summer of 2026, we're going to have a similar summer school on explainability in Eindhoven, right, which we are organizing, and there will be the topic of explainability, right, where we will exactly do kind of like a boot camp, right? What is explainability? How do we ensure it? Right? Why is it a problem or an issue or a need? Right? And so on and so forth. So in this sense, kind of in regular intervals, right? These summer schools, I think, play a really, really important role in the network to ensure that all the doctoral candidates have kind of a common base knowledge, right? So that they all kind of start from the same starting point. They all have a core understanding of these are the core issues like explainability, fairness, safety. These are the issues that we need to pay attention to. And they all start already with this level of knowledge. Also, of course, it's not just about the academic knowledge, it's also about getting to know one another, right? PhD students need to build their own network. And this is one way to build a network, not only with each other, but also with PIs within the project, right? and also with the institution in a broader sense. So, for example, in Copenhagen, it's not only going to be project PIs who are going to be presenting stuff at the winter school, right? But also other experts from the university and also from Denmark a bit more broadly. We're going to do a similar thing in the Netherlands, in Eindhoven. We're going to invite external experts, not only project PIs. So in this sense, the doctoral candidates have an opportunity to get to know one another, but also to expand their network. Beyond that, there's also an opportunity to kind of each one of us, the PIs, we have kind of our own doctoral candidates, but we also kind of co-supervise or co-advise other doctoral candidates within the network, right? So here the interaction is much less regular, right? I meet with my own doctoral candidate very, very regularly, but with these other doctoral candidates very irregularly, kind of every couple months or something like that, just kind of in the sense of like checking in. How is the project doing? What is the next stage, right? Can you provide some kind of outside influence or stimulus, right, that maybe lets them go in another direction that they haven't thought about before? So the alignAI network offers a lot of like opportunities for this kind of like really within the network, okay, helping each other out, making sure that doctoral students are supported not only from one particular group or institution, but kind of from people in the network as a whole.
What kind of tools, frameworks, or guidelines do you hope alignAI will produce?
Yeah, good question. This is, of course, hard to predict, partly because it's a training grant, right, or like it's a doctoral network. It's not a standard research project, right? In a research project, what you do is you set very specific goals, right, with deliverables, and then say within 3 years or however long the research project is, we hope to have achieved A, B, and C. In a training grant or a doctoral network, you also do this, right? But it's a lot more uncertain because you also don't want to constrain PhD students too much, right? You want to give PhD students enough freedom to develop their own project over which they have ownership, and and it's very hard to kind of predict in which way these projects are going to go, right? So in a way, I don't want to be too specific here, but generally speaking, for sure, what we want out of this project is two things. One of them is specific kind of research output, right? So we have several doctoral candidates working on broadly construed issues of how to align AI systems, right? Partly this involves developing better systems, right? So some of the more engineering students are actually developing solutions, technical solutions for better LLMs, right? In particular, with certain use cases like education, mental health, news consumption, things like this, right? So kind of areas of applications where LLMs are being used, and they are actually involved in the development of such LLMs. So that's one obvious kind of product that this research project can help produce. There are other doctoral candidates who are involved kind of more in like application side, but less the technical, so more kind of the context, right? So more like, okay, in which situations or scenarios or kind of technologies can LLMs be embedded, right? So it's not so much like the neural networks, like the nuts and bolts, but more like okay, in these kind of systems or applications, how can LLMs be used? How should they be used? When maybe should they not be used, right? And how do we make sure that users kind of get the best out of these machines, right? Without doing damage, maybe inadvertently or something like that. So that's another kind of application-centered hope or expectation. The other one, of course, me as a philosopher, again, that I'm certainly hoping for is more something like rules or regulations, right? Or norms or best practices. So here's actually something that I'm involved in that I haven't mentioned so far, but I'm very involved, for example, in standardization. So this standardization is a process. It's not like a legal process. It's not like the Use AI Act, right, which is a law, right? But standards are things that are coming out of institutions like ISO or IEEE, which are basically like best practice methods for how to develop and use AI systems. And so, similar to laws, standards are kind of like regulations or like norms, right? Which kind of say, look, this is the good way to use AI systems, right? Of course, it's very difficult to formulate, okay, what is the good way to use AI systems? What is the right way to use AI systems? And there's a lot of controversy and a lot of discussion about what the right way to use these things is. But in standardization, like in law, people try to figure this out. So what I'm hoping also for this project is to maybe yield some kind of norms or guidelines, right, for how should we align AI systems? In particular, how should we develop explainable and fair LLMs? Right. So this is not only like technical, like actual solutions, or also application centered, very practical things, but more theoretical things or theoretical guidelines as to like, okay, how should we act in a very general way? Right. What is the right way to develop? What is the right way to use? Right. How should we not use these systems? And so this is also what I'm hoping at least some of the DCs will produce. And for sure, those who are working in philosophy and ethics, that's kind of their focus, to develop these kind of things.
What kind of impact do you hope your work will have in the long term?
Yeah. Well, obviously, the impact that I want to have is to have better AI, right? So, where the term better is very, very difficult to define, right? We don't only want it to be more efficient or more reliable, right? Or more powerful, right? We also want it to be better in the sense of contributing to a better life, right? A better world, a better society. This is a really difficult challenge, right? And it's a very, very big goal, so to speak. The current approach here to try to ensure alignment, right, is the kind of state of the art approach. So that's what we're pursuing here very directly, right? Is to say, let's produce more aligned AI systems. But not only that, also let's let's kind of train people, right, who are going to be experts and in developing more aligned AI systems, right? So here's kind of one of the reasons why I'm an academic, why I'm a professor at university, is that I think change happens not just by kind of acting, right, and doing better things, but also by showing people how to act in better ways, right? So there's this educational mission here. And this is, I think, what a doctoral network is really, really important for, because we're not just kind of developing the next new tool or new application or even new theory. What we are doing is something better, right? We are training people to develop these new tools in the future, right? So it's kind of like the the story of, you can give a man a fish or you can teach a man to fish, right? So the idea is here to teach people how to fish, in the sense of teach them how to develop better AI, so that in the future, not just 3 years from now, but also 10, 20, 30 years, we will have better AI systems. So this is kind of the impact I want to have, not just better AI systems, but better humans, right? Who are then in the long term able to use and produce AI in better ways, ultimately, so that we have a better, more, peaceful and more just and, kind of thriving society where people can be happy. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for these articulate thoughts and for giving us your time. Thank you.